There are few licensed games as revered as the classic Ninja Turtle beat-em-ups, and this summer has been quite an exciting time for fans of those classics. One Up Arcade recently announced that amazing Ninja Turtle arcade cabinet for homes, and you better believe I'm getting one, and TMNT Rescue-Palooza has hit the internet. This is a fan game made by Merso X, who has made a few fan games up to this point, and they're quite good, but I'd say this is his best work yet. Now, for those of you who are about to click away because you heard the phrase fan game, I would advise you stick around just a little bit longer if you're any kind of a fan of the Ninja Turtle games, because good golly, this is quite a special little game. Over the years, there have been many attempts at recreating the beat-em-up classics, and just about every single one of them have fallen short, outside of that Game Boy movie tie-in, which I've already covered. Maybe you should go check out that video, because nobody did. But a fan and a handful of people have done what plenty of developers could not, and created easily one of the best Turtle games ever made. Nickelodeon, take note, because this is how you do a proper retro throwback. This is basically Sonic Mania of the Ninja Turtle games. Now, I'm gonna do my best not to spoil a bunch of things here, but I will still be throwing some levels and characters, and you just gotta let your boy gush a little bit here. If you've stumbled across this video before the game and you are any kind of a fan of the NES games, you really have no excuse. Click off this video and go play the game. It's free. It's a fan game, so you never know when it's gonna get taken down. So don't waste your time. Download link is gonna be in the description. And don't worry, I'll still be here. All you gotta do is like, subscribe, ring a bell, sell your firstborn, and there you go. Pop on by when you're done playing the game. Okay, moving on. This basically plays like the NES beat-em-ups from times gone by. You might recall in your youth that those weren't quite as pretty as their arcade big brothers, and no, Turtles 2 and 3 certainly did not play quite as nicely as Turtles in Time. So you might be wondering why X would make a fan game out of, well, what is essentially a demake of sorts. Well, I'm not quite sure myself, but considering just how much time I spent with the NES editions, it's really nice to see what is basically a 16-bit upgrade to those games. He does mix in sprites from Turtles in Time and some other games, and makes plenty of brand new sprites on top of all of it. And for the most part, it all blends together beautifully. Sprites have been recolored so they match everything else, so there's no jarring, sloppy mesh here, and you'll be seeing sprites from all kinds of Turtle titles, and I would say most, if not all, fit in just fine. There have been a couple of hiccups, but nothing super noteworthy, just little nitpicky things. And speaking of characters, that's the major draw of this particular game. Rescue-Palooza gets its name because this time Shredder has captured everybody. Story is barely here, but it never was to begin with, and it's hilarious. You get thrown into an open world map, which is a loving callback to the original TMNT NES game, and pick a level to punch through. Before the level begins, you get to pick your character, and just, oh my god, man, look at this character select screen. If you don't know what you're looking at, this was the same design as the packaging of the old school Turtle toys, ones I grew up with. You of course start off with the 4 brothers, but once you beat a level, you unlock new characters to play once they're rescued, and even the bosses once you're done beating them up. By the time you're done with the game, you're gonna have around 60 characters to choose from. And again, I don't want to show you too much. Part of the fun back in the day was seeing who would show up at the end of a level, and there were some definite surprises in this roster. What is also surprising is who you may end up playing more than the others. Every character has their own unique stats and special attack and hitboxes. It's a little hit and miss in some spots, but considering how many characters you have to play around with, this is quite an impressive feat. There are certain challenges and certain levels that work better with some characters compared to others, and I was disappointed to find that some of my favorites, such as Toka here, were next to useless. But the likes of Rat King, never one of my favorite characters, ended up being my most reliable character. I easily played him more than anybody else just so I can make sure I get through a level safely. And that's something I should also mention. The game only gives you 10 lives, and that's it. There are bonus levels where you can earn extra lives, but they're pretty sporadic, and if you're jumping in blind, there's a good chance you're going to end up in the final stages with only 1 life and no possibility to earn any extras. And I should note, you can play with up to 3 friends, and I only played by myself. And really, once you understand what you have to work with, you're probably going to be just fine. I couldn't get past the final few bosses on my own, so I just reset the whole thing, took a couple hours, played through it again, and had plenty of lives left over. So there are factors to consider, but for my first time through, by myself, learning the rules as I went, and playing every character I get my hands on, getting to this endpoint with 1 life and no choice between the multitude of characters I had unlocked was pretty frustrating. Maybe this could get tweaked a little bit later, maybe not, I don't know. Like I said, the second playthrough was a breeze in comparison and was still a lot of fun. And all that said, this is still way more fair than the original NES games. It's been a while, but I don't remember beating any of those games when I was a kid. I just played as long as I could and then would just try again and again and again. In comparison, Rescue-Palooza is far more generous and balanced. And like I said, there are some quality of life improvements. This does feel a little bit better than those old games, if I remember correctly, and where in 3, where the special attack would drain life, it instead gets its own separate gauge here, which is represented by a little ooze container, and it's precious. It refills in time, and depending on the character, can take longer or shorter to replenish. Also, from the old games, you can of course expect stages from those said games, but they have been polished up, remixed, and go into places you might not be expecting, and the game even makes callbacks to the original NES game by being a straight up side-scroller at times. Doesn't quite work as well as the rest of the game, but the platforming challenges aren't aren't so bad. And again, this is far more forgiving than the original game it was based off of. And don't worry, there's no underwater electric levels. Now, I'm coming at this from a perspective of an old school Turtles fan. Does this game work without the nostalgia? I mean, yeah, certainly. It's a competent game in its own right, but it is still based off of old NES games. Despite the quality of life improvements, it still can be a bit stiff, difficulty is a bit unbalanced from stage to stage, and again, going in blind and alone can leave you locked into a frustrating gauntlet for the final stages. It's still fun, and if you don't know anything about it, maybe it'll help you see why all of us fans loved it back in the early 90s. But this game is for the fans first and foremost. It integrates loving Easter eggs at every turn, voice clips from the show that mesh in surprisingly well, and give characters a chance to shine in ways we never had the chance before. Every time the newer cartoons make callbacks to the 80s Turtles, they always make a joke about how tame their fighting techniques are, and I get why, going by the cartoon. If you go back to those old episodes, they're pretty tame. So why is it I remember these turtles slapping around purple ninjas so vividly? Well, that's probably because of these games. Don't get me wrong, I love the newer turtle cartoons. I've even enjoyed newer games. But the old school beat-em-ups remind me, more than any of the other turtles, just how awesome these particular ones were. There was more action-packed in the video games than there ever was in the show, and it was awesome seeing the turtles battle it out with all of these wacky characters. Rescue-Palooza understands this and lets you go wild in what has to be one of the best fan games I have ever played. Is there room for improvement? Sure, tiny glitches here and there, and I've been seeing some forum complaints about issues with setup and controller detection, but all in all, this is one of the best Ninja Turtle games ever made, and it's free. If you're a fan of the Turtles on any level, you owe it to yourself to check this game out. I've said it plenty, and I'll say it one more time. Play this game. Cowabunga, dudes and dudettes.